Downton Abbey TV show review. I'm going to have to watch myself on this review because I have a long history of mispronouncing the name of this show as Downtown Abbey, but it's actually Downton Abbey. I'm probably going to slip into saying Downtown Abbey halfway through this video, so just watch out for that and let me know in the comments if I slip up. Anyways, this is part of what I'm calling my television addiction series, in which I'm going through all the TV shows I watched in 2011 and 2012 when I was living in Cambodia and had way too much access to DVD box sets of TV shows and spent way too much time watching TV. For more information on what this series is and why I'm doing it, I'll link to a video in the description down below in which I introduce this whole project. But today I'm going to talk about Downton Abbey TV series, which a friend of mine actually introduced me to back in, I believe it was 2011, when I was back in the USA for a couple months before moving to Cambodia. And he was trying to catch me up on all the TV series I had missed while I had been outside of the country, living in Japan and then living in Australia. And he showed me this series, which in the USA was run on PBS. PBS is the public broadcasting system. It's where educational shows or prestige shows are usually put. It had been run on PBS on a show called Masterpiece Theater. Now, Masterpiece Theater, I have childhood memories of. I've not watched that show in forever, but I remember way back in the early 80s watching that show because it was one of the few shows my parents let me watch. My parents were rather restrictive as to my television input. They believed television was largely a waste of time, and to be fair, it is largely a waste of time, especially those cartoons in the 1980s that were largely just an advertisement for toys, but which I so badly wanted to watch when I was young and wasn't allowed to watch. But we were allowed to watch PBS, and we were allowed to watch Masterpiece Theater. Now, Masterpiece Theater, if you're not familiar with it, it's a show, and you watch it, and the intro has all these violins playing, and I got this real kind of classical atmosphere. And then it was a showcase for prestige shows. I think most of them came from Britain, but they were supposed to be really high quality TV that you could watch on the American public broadcasting system. And so when he said, okay, this has been shown on PBS on the Masterpiece Theater. Actually, I think theater has since been dropped from the name. They just call it Masterpiece now. But anyways, when he said that, I was thinking, oh, right, okay, well, this is really high quality prestige TV then. And he showed me the first episode, and it looked really interesting. And, you could see where the prestige was. It seemed like a very highbrow concept, mixed in with a lot of intrigue and interest, etc. Now, if you're not familiar with the basic premise behind the TV show, actually, I suspect you are familiar with the basic premise of the TV show because it became popular enough that it was part of the pop culture and it was satirized and everyone was making references to it. But on the off chance you're not familiar with the premise behind the TV show, the premise behind the TV show is Downton Abbey is the name of a aristocratic estate. So it's not actually an abbey as in like a church building. It's an estate somewhere in England where this aristocratic family is living on their big, well, what do they call it? Manor or household, or, it's like a big mansion that houses an aristocratic family. And so there's some drama going on. The show opens up with like the heir to the estate being drowned during the Titanic in 1912. And then the drama kind of goes on from there. But the thing that's really interesting about the show, at least at the initial episodes, is it shows you all the stuff that's involved with running an estate this big. So you have the aristocratic family kind of doing their plotting and their usual things and talking about who's going to marry who, and all that stuff that you associate with these aristocratic families from War and Peace or from Jane Eyre or from whatever. But then you also have what's going on in the servants. So you've got down in the servants' quarters, what the servants' drama, who's mad at who and who's got the best job, and what the history of the servants are, as well as it shows you quite visually all the work that the servants are doing to keep this huge estate running. So, they're up in the morning and they're preparing breakfast and they're ironing the newspaper. And it's this huge estate, as these aristocratic estates were back in those days. And all the work and all the people that it took to keep this estate running. And for that reason alone, it's worth watching. I don't know if it's worth watching the whole thing, but it's definitely worth watching the first couple episodes to get the flavor of it and to just kind of see visually how they show. They do a very good job of showing everything that's going on in this estate, and you can just kind of see how it's being run. According to Wikipedia, Downton Abbey is based on a British show that had the exact same premise from the early 70s called Upstairs, Downstairs. So the idea of being upstairs, downstairs, right? So you've got the aristocratic family upstairs, and then downstairs you got the servants' quarters. And then there's a storyline going up about what the aristocratic family is doing, and there's a storyline running in parallel to that about what's going on in the servants' quarters. Again, according to Wikipedia, the guy who created Downton Abbey kind of admits quite freely to having borrowed from that show. But that show hadn't been on TV for like a generation. It hadn't been on TV since the early 70s. So, admit it, if you've heard about that show at all, it's not because you saw it on TV, right? You first heard about that show because you read about it being in connection with Downton Abbey. I mean, that's how everybody's heard about it nowadays. So the justification being, if Downton Abbey had never been on TV, then a new generation would not have been familiar with this concept. And I think that's fair enough. I never would have heard of Upstairs, Downstairs if it hadn't been from Downton Abbey. I still haven't seen any episodes of Upstairs, Downstairs. But apparently Upstairs, Downstairs back in its day was rerun on PBS Masterpiece Theater. So anyways, back when I was in the US, my friend just showed me that one episode of it, and it looked really interesting, and it was from PBS Masterpiece Theater, or rerun on PBS Masterpiece Theater. It was originally a British production. So when I saw the DVDs in Cambodia, I decided to check them out, and I made it all the way through season 1, and then I just stopped watching after that. It's well done for what it is, but, well, okay, so here we go in with the weight of expectations. Because I was expecting something very prestige from Masterpiece Theater, I was a bit disappointed as you get further and further into the series to realize that this is just essentially a soap opera. I mean, it's a time period soap opera. And it's something where they obviously had the budget to spend on kind of fancy costumes and a big elaborate set and then the big house, which I don't know how they got access to this huge estate, which forms the basis for the whole drama. But the plot lines, and it's just a soap opera. And so the more I watched it, the more I realized I was not watching some sort of prestige Masterpiece Theater that was going to enrich my mind, but it was just a silly soap opera with kind of soap opera type plot lines. And then I just stopped watching after the first season. Given what I hear about the subsequent seasons, the storyline just got more and more ridiculous, and the soap opera aspect of it just got more and more amped up. I actually haven't watched any of the other seasons, so I can't speak to it personally. But there's a video I find quite funny by a guy named David Mitchell, who's a British comedian. He's actually in the TV show Peep Show, which I will talk about later as I'm working my way through all the TV shows I wasted my life on. But he has a YouTube channel, or at least he did, where he kind of gives his opinion on stuff. And he's got a very funny video where he talks about how awful Downton Abbey got in its second season and how people kept watching it anyways. And I'll link to that video in the description down below. I find it quite funny. I've never actually seen the second series myself, but the first series was enough. It was very obvious towards the end of the first series that this was just a soap opera. Which I guess, now that I'm making that distinction between prestige TV, masterpiece theater, and just a cheap soap opera, I guess that begs the question, what is the difference? Where does the line get drawn between something very highbrow and intelligent and just another crummy soap opera? Or aren't I using loaded terms by talking about a soap opera? Isn't that a pejorative term used to describe what housewives watch? And perhaps it's a bit of a sexist term, or a way of what's the word I want to use? Biasing what a certain class of people are predisposed to like. And maybe it is. And maybe if I went back through and examined all the stuff that's been on Masterpiece Theater over the years, I might find it's not nearly as highbrow as I thought it was on the other end of the equation. I actually haven't been keeping up with Masterpiece Theater. There was a period in the early 80s when I was watching it because that's one of the few shows my parents let me watch. But I actually have no great insight into what the show was like before the 80s or what the show was like after the early 80s. But, and I know this is subjective, and I know that there are fans of Downton Abbey who insist that it is a really great show. But to my mind, what separates maybe something more highbrow from something I would call a soap opera is you've got plot lines which are a little bit more unrealistic. The contrivance factor is heightened. The needless drama is heightened. You've got unearned drama where characters are being antagonistic just for the sake of being antagonistic, just for the sake of heightening the drama, or things are happening not just for the sake of cheap drama and conflict, I guess. And I realize I'm not doing a good job of describing this. This is why I'm not a professional critic. This is why I'm just an amateur on YouTube. But sorry, with apologies, with acknowledging the fact that I'm not doing a good job of articulating this. That is the general vibe I got from this show. That it was just kind of cheap conflict and cheap drama and contrivance and conflict that was not earned, but was forced for the sake of making drama. And so that's why I would classify it as more soap opera-esque and not highbrow television, even though it was on Masterpiece Theater in the U.S., which has a reputation for showing the more highbrow stuff. But yeah, one season, and then I was done. It wasn't terrible. You know, it wasn't the worst thing ever. I could have maybe stuck around for season 2, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I needed to. All that being said, though, if you've never seen an episode of this, it is actually worth checking out. Maybe watch the whole first season, or maybe just watch a couple episodes. I think a couple episodes are more than enough to get the flavor. and to kind of see visually what they've got going on with this huge estate and kind of all the behind the scenes stuff that it takes to get this estate up and running every day. I mean, it's quite amazing to think about how much money and manpower it took just to kind of keep these aristocrats living in these estates, so they could just sit in their estates all day and do nothing. So when you hear about how these the aristocracy or these aristocrats always needed to kind of, they were always trying to get money, right? When you read about them in the history books, they were always desperate to get more money. You can see in this show why they were always desperate to get more money. I mean, how much money would it have cost just to keep their staff running on a daily basis like that? Yeah, and to keep the house cleaned and the garden maintained and all that stuff. It's worth watching the first couple episodes just for those visuals. Then once you get past the first couple episodes, then I guess it's your call whether you want to keep watching it or not. All right. Let me know what you thought about the series if you have any strong opinions on it.